Ezekiel Thompson sat in the sterile hospital room, the steady beep of the heart monitor the only sound that filled the air. His body, once vibrant and full of life, felt heavy and frail. The illness had taken its toll, gradually at first, with bouts of fatigue that he dismissed as stress. But over the past few months, it had worsened, and now the doctors had finally given him the grim news. There was nothing more they could do. The diagnosis was vague, some rare, terminal disease. They didn't have a name for it, not one that made sense to him. It wasn't just physical. It felt as if it had reached into the very core of him, unearthing memories and fears he had long buried. He didn't know how to fight it, or even if he wanted to. His mind wandered back to the life he had built. The long hours spent at work, the constant pursuit of success, the sacrifices made for his career. But now, faced with death, those accomplishments felt meaningless. He had achieved everything he thought he wanted, yet nothing truly brought him peace. As the evening light filtered through the window, Ezekiel glanced at the small stack of books on his bedside table. His sister, Sarah, had insisted he read them. They were about life after death, spirituality, and the journey of the soul, subjects he had always dismissed as fanciful. But in his current state, with death looming on the horizon, he had become desperate for answers. He opened the nearest book, The Journey Beyond the Veil. It had been his mother's gift, and he had shoved it away along with everything else that didn't fit into his carefully structured life. But now, in his isolation, it was all he had. The words on the page blurred before him, the sentences seeming to stretch and contract as if they were alive. He read them again and again, and then stopped on one particular line. The soul that seeks answers will find them, but the answers may come at a cost. To understand the afterlife, one must first confront their own life, their regrets, and their greatest fears. Ezekiel felt a chill wash over him. The sentence felt as though it was meant for him. Confront their own life. He had never thought about it that way, had never taken the time to reflect on the choices he had made, the people he had hurt, or the relationships he had neglected. All those years spent chasing ambition. Was it all for nothing? As he closed the book, the room seemed to grow colder. The weight of his thoughts pressed on him. He had made so many mistakes, but could he really confront them now? Was it too late? The lights in the room flickered, and a strange, cold wind rushed through the open window, carrying with it a faint whisper. Ezekiel froze. He wasn't sure if it was his mind playing tricks on him, or if something else was at work. Ezekiel! The voice was soft, yet it pierced the silence like a needle. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Ezekiel's breath caught in his throat. He glanced around the room, but there was no one there. His heart raced as he felt a presence, something intangible, yet undeniable. He stood up, his legs weak, and walked toward the window. Outside, the sky was growing darker, the city lights twinkling like distant stars. A strange pull gripped him, a sense of urgency that he couldn't explain. The voice had called him, and now it felt as if something was waiting for him. Ezekiel, the voice repeated. Come to me? He hesitated, a mixture of fear and curiosity flooding his mind. Was this the beginning of the end, or something else entirely? The voice had promised answers, and though he didn't know what kind of answers awaited him, Ezekiel realized that he had no other choice. He had nothing left to lose. With a final glance at the hospital room, he stepped into the darkness, leaving behind everything he knew. The world around Ezekiel dissolved into a swirl of colors, light and shadow. He could no longer feel the ground beneath his feet, nor the cool air of the hospital room that had only moments ago surrounded him. He felt weightless, as though his very being had been untethered from time and space. The strange voice that had beckoned him now resonated deeply in his soul, as though it were calling him to something beyond his understanding. The colors shifted, swirling like a storm at sea. Ezekiel tried to speak, but no words came. There was only the sensation of movement, the feeling of being pulled into the unknown. Suddenly, the storm cleared. The vibrant chaos of colors faded, and Ezekiel found himself standing in a place that felt both alien and familiar. It was a vast expanse, stretching endlessly in all directions, yet it was strangely beautiful. The sky above him was a soft, ethereal shade of violet, and the ground beneath him glowed with a faint golden hue. He looked around, feeling a mix of awe and confusion. The landscape was unlike anything he'd ever seen. Misty forests of towering trees whose leaves shimmered like silver, fields of flowers that danced in the wind, and distant mountains that seemed to touch the very sky. It was a place of serenity, but there was also an underlying tension in the air. Ezekiel felt as though he were standing at the threshold of something both wondrous and dangerous. "Where am I?" he whispered, though he knew there would be no answer. "You are between worlds, Ezekiel," came a voice from behind him, soft yet commanding. Ezekiel turned, his heart racing. Standing before him was a figure cloaked in shadow, a presence both powerful and unsettling. The figure was tall, its features obscured by the darkness that seemed to hang around it like a shroud. Yet, despite the darkness, Ezekiel felt no fear. Instead, he felt an overwhelming sense of curiosity. "I am Azrael," the figure said, its voice deep and resonant, as if it came from the very depths of the universe. "I have come to guide you on your journey." Ezekiel's breath caught in his throat. Azrael? He had heard the name before in stories and whispered legends, but he had never believed in them. Azrael was supposed to be a myth, a figure of death and fate. Yet here it stood before him, real and present. "Am I dead?" Ezekiel asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. Azrael tilted his head, his form shifting slightly as though the shadows themselves were alive. "Not yet, but your time in the physical world is running out. You have been called to this realm to understand the nature of existence, to confront your soul's journey before your physical life ends." Ezekiel felt a shiver run through him. "But I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask for any of this." Azrael's gaze softened, though his eyes were still unreadable. "You did not ask, but you have been chosen. Your soul is troubled, filled with regret and unfulfilled desires. You have lived your life disconnected from the truth of who you are. It is time to confront that truth." Ezekiel felt a surge of panic. "No, I haven't lived my life like that. I've worked hard. I've achieved things. I'm successful. That's all that matters, right?" Azrael stepped closer, his shadowy form casting a long, eerie silhouette across the golden ground. "Success in the eyes of the world does not equate to success of the soul. You may have built a life, Ezekiel, but you have neglected the heart of that life, love, connection, and meaning." The words hit Ezekiel like a physical blow. The truth of them reverberated deep within his chest. He had spent years climbing the corporate ladder, sacrificing relationships, love, and even himself in the pursuit of success. But now, in this strange place, he realized how hollow that pursuit had been. "What do I do now?" Ezekiel asked, his voice trembling. Azrael's presence seemed to grow even more commanding. "You must journey through this realm, Ezekiel. You must confront the choices you made, the regrets you carry. Only then will you understand what comes next." Suddenly, the world around him shifted again. The serene landscape dissolved, replaced by an eerie, familiar setting, his childhood home. The walls, once bright and welcoming, now stood faded and cracked, like memories left too long to decay. The air was thick with an unsettling silence. "I'm not ready for this," Ezekiel muttered, stepping back, his heart pounding. Azrael's voice echoed through the empty house. "You must face the past and move forward. The house you see before you is the house of your regrets, the foundation of your actions. Walk through it." Ezekiel hesitated, feeling a cold chill sweep over him. He had not returned to this place in years, not since his father passed away. There were too many memories here, memories he had locked away, buried deep within himself. But the pull was undeniable. He stepped forward, crossing the threshold of the house, each step heavier than the last. As he moved through the darkened rooms, memories began to flood back. The laughter of his parents, the warm embrace of his sister Sarah, the sense of belonging he had once felt. But those memories were overshadowed by the guilt he had carried with him for so long. He stopped in front of an old photograph of his family on the mantelpiece. His father's warm smile looked back at him, and his mother's eyes were filled with hope. The photograph was a reminder of a time when things felt whole, before Ezekiel had buried himself in his work, before he had pulled away from the ones who loved him. "I've failed them," Ezekiel whispered, his voice breaking. "I've failed everyone who cared about me." Azrael appeared beside him, silent as ever, watching him as he stood in front of the photograph. Your failures are not an end, Ezekiel. They are a part of your journey. You must understand that only by confronting the past can you find peace. Ezekiel closed his eyes, his heart heavy with the weight of his mistakes. He had neglected his family, abandoned his relationships in the pursuit of a future that now seemed meaningless. In that moment, he realized that all the success he had achieved could never fill the void he had created in his life. "I'm sorry," he whispered, not to Azrael, but to the photograph of his family. "I'm so sorry." The room around Ezekiel shifted again, this time into something far more painful. The photograph of his family dissolved before his eyes, and the house he had once called home began to fade into darkness. But the darkness wasn't complete. It was filled with shadows of his past, his mistakes, and regrets, each one more vivid than the last. He found himself standing in the middle of a street, one he recognized immediately, his old neighborhood. It was just as it had been when he was young, with the familiar, worn-down houses and cracked sidewalks. The echoes of his past floated in the air. Children laughing, neighbors chatting, the clink of bicycles against the pavement. But all these sounds were muted, distant, as if they belonged to a time long gone. Ezekiel couldn't help but feel the weight of time pressing down on him. This place, this street, was where it all began. The choices, the turning points, the friendships that faded away. He could almost see his younger self, running down the sidewalk, full of hope, full of life. But that version of him felt like a stranger now. "Why am I here?" Ezekiel whispered, his voice trembling. Azrael appeared at his side once more, his figure emerging from the shadows like a wraith. "This is the first stop in your journey, the crossroads of your past. You must face the people you left behind, people you once cared for, but whom you abandoned in your quest for success." Suddenly, a figure stepped out from the shadows, a man in his mid-30s, tall, with a warm smile. It was Jared, his best friend from high school, the one person Ezekiel had trusted with his dreams. But there was a distance in Jared's eyes now, a coldness that hadn't been there before. "Ezekiel," Jared said, his voice tinged with a bitterness that sent a shock through Ezekiel's chest. "You finally show up. It's been years, hasn't it?" Ezekiel's heart clenched. "Jared, I didn't forget you. I got caught up with work." Jared shook his head, a sad, almost pitying look in his eyes. "You say that every time. You're always too busy. But you weren't too busy to climb that ladder, were you? Too busy to leave the people who matter behind." Ezekiel swallowed hard. His throat felt tight, as if the words he avoided for so long were now choking him. I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't mean to..." Jared cut him off. "You chose your career over your friends. Ezekiel, over your family. Over me. I'm not the only one who feels it. Sarah does, too." Ezekiel's chest tightened at the mention of Sarah. He hadn't spoken to her in months, hadn't even realized how much time had passed. All those years of working late, of putting his career first, of ignoring the ones who needed him the most, he had left them behind, all in the name of success. "I'm sorry," Ezekiel said, his voice breaking. "I didn't know what I was doing. I thought if I could just make it, if I could just be successful, everything would fall into place. But I see how much I've lost." Jared looked at him for a moment, his expression softening just slightly. "You can't undo the past, Ezekiel, but you can make amends. You can stop running from the people who love you. Don't wait until it's too late." The word struck Ezekiel like a punch to the gut. The truth of them was undeniable. He had spent so long running from the people who mattered most, thinking that success and achievement would fill the emptiness inside him. But now, standing in this place of his past, Ezekiel realized that no amount of career success could ever make up for the relationships he had sacrificed. "I'm sorry, Jared," Ezekiel whispered again, his eyes filled with tears. "I failed you. I failed all of you." Jared nodded, but there was no anger in his gaze anymore, only quiet understanding. "Maybe you can still make it right. But first, you have to face your biggest regret, the one thing you've been running from for so long." Ezekiel didn't need to ask. He already knew what that regret was. He turned away from Jared, his heart pounding as he walked down the familiar street, toward the house at the end of the block. the house where he and his sister Sarah had grown up. The house was as it had always been, but there was an oppressive heaviness in the air. It wasn't just the weight of time, but the weight of years of neglect, of things left unsaid, of apologies never made. He stepped inside. The living room was empty, but the memory of his family was everywhere. Pictures on the walls, the scent of his mother's cooking still lingering in the air. And then, from the kitchen, he heard the soft sound of footsteps. It was Sarah. She stood in the doorway, her expression a mix of sadness and resignation. She hadn't changed much, but the hurt in her eyes was undeniable. "Ezekiel," she said, her voice quieter than he remembered. "I thought you were done running. I thought you were going to be here this time." He wanted to say something, anything, but the words felt stuck in his throat. He had tried to push her away so many times over the years, thinking that work and ambition would fill the hole in his heart. But now, standing before her, he realized how wrong he had been. I've been selfish, Sarah," Ezekiel said, his voice shaky. "I've been so caught up in my own world that I didn't see how much I hurt you. I didn't see how much you needed me. I failed you." Her eyes softened, but the hurt was still there. "You didn't just fail me, Ezekiel. You failed us. Mom, Dad, they're gone, and I was left to carry it all. I tried to call you, tried to keep you close, but you were too busy, too focused on everything else." Ezekiel's chest tightened. The guilt was suffocating now, a force he could no longer escape. "I'm so sorry. I should have been there. I should have been a better brother." Sarah didn't say anything at first, but her eyes filled with tears. She took a step toward him, slowly, hesitantly. "It's not too late, Ezekiel. You can still make it right." And in that moment, Ezekiel knew the truth. He could never undo the past, but he could make a change now. He could stop running. He could start healing. "Will you forgive me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah nodded, her tears falling freely now. "I've already forgiven you. I just need you to be here." Ezekiel reached out, pulling her into a tight embrace, and for the first time in years, he felt a sense of peace settle over him. The world around Ezekiel began to blur again, the familiar house and the weight of his emotional revelations fading into the ether. His mind still raced with the conversations he had just experienced, his heart heavy with regret, but also with a strange sense of release. Sarah's forgiveness had been the first step, an unspoken promise that he could start anew, that there was a chance to rebuild what he had broken. But as the world swirled into nothingness, Ezekiel realized he was not yet done. There was something more, something deeper waiting for him, an ultimate test, one that would decide whether he could fully embrace the chance of redemption or whether he would remain forever bound to the past. The mist lifted, and before him stood Azrael, his shadowy figure as imposing as ever. But now, there was something more in the figure's presence, something ominous. "You have made progress, Ezekiel," Azrael said, his voice the same deep resonance that seemed to echo from beyond the fabric of existence. "You have confronted your past. You have sought forgiveness, and you have found peace with those you abandoned. But now you must face the final choice." Ezekiel swallowed hard, his throat dry. What choice? His mind was a haze, still reeling from the emotional upheaval confronting his regrets. He wasn't ready for another test, wasn't ready to face another part of himself. Azrael stepped forward, his form growing even darker, more foreboding. "The afterlife is not a reward. It is not a resting place. It is a state of existence where souls are given the opportunity to grow beyond their earthly limitations. You have done the work required. But you are at a crossroads now." Ezekiel's heart skipped. He could feel the tension building in the air. "I don't understand. I confronted my mistakes. I've learned to forgive. Isn't that enough?" Azrael tilted his head, and his voice grew softer, more philosophical. "It is only enough if you choose to live in a way that reflects that forgiveness. Your redemption does not lie in your ability to accept forgiveness. It lies in your ability to share that understanding with the world. You must choose to return to the living world, not to continue the life you lived, but to live a life transformed by everything you've learned here." Ezekiel looked around, feeling the pull of the afterlife, an unfamiliar yet peaceful place. "But can I stay here? Isn't this where I'm meant to be?" It feels like peace. Azrael's gaze pierced through him, and for the first time, Ezekiel saw something human, an understanding of the conflict that raged within him. This peace is fleeting, Ezekiel. The true peace comes not from escaping life, but from living it with intention. To stay here would be to remain stagnant. It would be a surrender to a false ideal comfort. A dark figure appeared beside Azrael, stepping from the shadows, a figure Ezekiel recognized immediately, though he had only seen it once before. It was a mysterious stranger, the same figure who had briefly appeared at the threshold of his journey. This time, however, the stranger's presence was more distinct. There was something ancient in the stranger's gaze, as if he had seen everything there was to see, both in life and beyond it. The choice is not as simple as Azrael makes it seem, the stranger said, his voice filled with an unsettling calm. The afterlife is not merely a realm of peace, but prison of sorts. Souls are kept here, not as punishment, but as part of a cosmic balance. There is an order to this place, Ezekiel, one you cannot yet comprehend. Ezekiel's heart pounded. He felt trapped between the two figures, the serene promise of peace that Azrael offered and the shadow of doubt cast by the stranger. "What are you saying?" Ezekiel asked, his voice trembling with confusion. "I thought this was the end of my journey. I thought I was being guided to find peace." The stranger took a step closer, his form flickering in and out of focus. "What you've been told is not the full truth. You are not just here to seek peace. You are here because you've been chosen for a purpose. The afterlife is not a destination. It is a crossroads where decisions are made. But those who come here are not simply given rest. They are tested, Ezekiel, tested by forces far beyond your understanding." Azrael's form flickered, his presence growing darker with each word. "This is the truth, Ezekiel. The stranger seeks to deceive you. There is no test beyond this moment. You've already faced your fears. You've already reconciled with your past. Your soul is ready to move on." Ezekiel felt torn, the weight of both figures pressing down on him. His mind reeled with what the stranger had just said. Could it be true? Was there more at play here than just personal growth and redemption? Had he been led into a trap, an illusion created by Azrael to keep him imprisoned in this strange liminal space? "The stranger is right," Ezekiel said, his voice trembling. "I'm not ready to accept peace yet. Not while I still have something to give. I've lived my life running from everything that truly matters. But now I can see the truth. If I stay here, I will be choosing comfort over growth. And that's not what I've learned here." Azrael's gaze darkened. "You choose a path of uncertainty. Then, be careful, Ezekiel. The forces you now challenge are not ones you can easily escape." The stranger stepped forward, his form now clearly defined, and placed a hand on Ezekiel's shoulder. "You are right to choose the path of growth. But remember this, Ezekiel. The afterlife is not a final resting place. It is a state of change, just as life is. It is time to return to your world. Only then will you truly fulfill your purpose." For a moment, Ezekiel felt the weight of the decision settle over him. The afterlife had shown him peace, but the peace had come at the cost of living. His true purpose was not to settle into comfort, but to return and live with the understanding he had gained. He had unfinished business in the world of the living. He looked at Azrael, then back at the stranger, and finally made his decision. "I choose to return," Ezekiel said, his voice steady, "not to the life I lived, but to the life I will create. I've learned enough to know that the only way to truly find peace is by living authentically, by facing the truth and sharing it with others. That's what I have to do." Azrael stepped back, his form flickering one last time. "So be it, Ezekiel. But remember, once you leave this place, there is no turning back." With a final heavy breath, Ezekiel stepped forward, and the world around him began to shift. The golden mist that had surrounded him faded, and the cool air of the hospital room returned. He could feel his body once again, the physical weight of it, the sensation of his heart beating, the thrum of life flowing through his veins. But this time it was different. He was different. The journey had changed him, and as he opened his eyes to the familiar surroundings of the hospital, Ezekiel knew he had been given a second chance, not just at life, but at truly living. Ezekiel's eyes fluttered open. The stark, fluorescent lights of the hospital room greeted him, almost blinding in their harsh brightness. He blinked several times, adjusting to the unfamiliar yet strangely familiar surroundings. His body felt heavier than he remembered, yet the strange, ethereal weightlessness he had felt in the afterlife had dissipated. He was back. The first thing he noticed was the rhythmic beep of the heart monitor. His chest rose and fell with each breath, the sound grounding him in the physical world. He was alive and yet changed. The memories of his journey through the afterlife, of confronting his regrets, facing his fears, and seeking redemption, were still fresh in his mind. He could feel them reverberating through him, each memory a pulse in his chest. He had learned so much, but it felt as though something was still missing, a sense of unfinished business he needed to attend to. He glanced around the room, taking in the sterile white walls and the soft beeping of the machines around him. But beyond that, something deeper had shifted. He could hear voices, his sister Sarah's, echoing softly in the back of his mind, and Jared's, the voice of his past echoing with both disappointment and understanding. The door to his hospital room creaked open, and in stepped his doctor, a middle-aged man with a kind but worn face. "Mr. Thompson," the doctor said, looking over his chart with a slight frown. "We've run a series of tests. We're unsure how to explain it, but the results show that your condition has reversed. The illness, the one we thought was terminal, it's gone. Completely. There's no sign of it left." Ezekiel's heart skipped a beat. "What?" His voice came out hoarse, the reality of the words not quite sinking in. He had been dying, but now his body was healed? The doctor raised an eyebrow, confusion clouding his expression. "I'm as baffled as you are, but we'll continue to monitor you, of course. For now, we can only conclude that you're in remission. A miracle, perhaps." A miracle. The word echoed in Ezekiel's mind as he processed what had just happened. He had been given a second chance, a life restored. But now, he understood it wasn't a gift he could take lightly. There was work to be done. As the doctor left to prepare the discharge paperwork, Ezekiel sat up slowly, feeling the weight of the decision that still lingered in the air. He had been given a gift, yes, but what would he do with it? Before he could think further, the door to his room opened once more, and Sarah stepped inside. Her face, though still filled with worry, now held a sense of relief. "Ezekiel," she said, her voice trembling as she walked over to his bed. "I can't believe it. I thought I'd lost you. You're really here." Ezekiel looked up at his sister, the emotions he'd been holding back bubbling to the surface. He had been given the chance to rebuild, to make things right, but he had to start with her. She was the one person who had been there through everything, the one person he had neglected most. "I'm sorry, Sarah," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I've failed you for so long. I took you for granted, and I never understood how much I hurt you." Sarah's eyes softened as she reached out and took his hand. "I've forgiven you, Ezekiel. I know you were just lost, but now it's time for you to find your way back. And I'll be here to help you, no matter what." Her words felt like a balm to his soul, a soothing balm for the wound of years spent in emotional isolation. He wasn't alone anymore, and he realized then that this was where his true journey had to begin. It wasn't enough to change within himself. He had to rebuild the relationships he had destroyed, to show up for the people who had always been there for him. "I want to make things right," he said, his voice firm with newfound resolve. "I've wasted so much time, Sarah, but I swear to you I'll make up for it. I'll be here. For you. For everyone I've hurt." Tears welled up in her eyes, but this time they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief. "I've missed you, Ezekiel. I've missed my brother." Ezekiel stood up from the bed, his legs unsteady but his heart sure. The world outside the hospital room waited for him, and he knew that his true work lay not in finding peace within the afterlife, but in creating peace in the life he still had to live. He had been given a second chance, but it wasn't just a second chance at health. It was a second chance to live authentically, to love fully, and to mend the broken bonds he had cast aside. As he stepped out of the hospital room, Sarah by his side, he felt the weight of the past still lingering, but it no longer felt like a burden. It was a lesson he was ready to embrace fully. There would be challenges, no doubt, The world wasn't a perfect place, and neither was he. But now, Ezekiel knew what he needed to do. He needed to live, truly live, and share the wisdom he had gained from his journey. For the first time in a long while, Ezekiel smiled, not just a polite smile, but a real one, filled with hope. It wasn't the smile of someone who had achieved success or climbed a ladder. It was a smile of someone who had found the true meaning of life. And with that, he walked forward into the unknown, knowing that whatever came next, he was ready.